Hello and welcome to Visual Radio Live on Tape. That's Ron Cox's show, Live on Tape. It's 5 o'clock on May 10th, 2012, I think it is, and Stephen Davis returns. I thought you were going to bring Collie with you.
No, this was an unauthorized book, and she's not too happy about it, so...
I thought she liked it.
No, she liked it last summer, but she don't like it now.
I don't find it, I don't find it anything wrong with it so far.
Neither. I think it's, a fabulous book and a very true account of her long career and very eventful life, but she thinks it's too revealing, and therefore she feels vulnerable and overexposed, and so she has made no bones about her displeasure with More Room in a Broken Heart, The True Adventures of Carly Simon.
I mean, like Jim Morrison can't complain about your excellent book on Jim Morrison. You didn't wait for her to no longer criticize your work, so she should be thankful. She gets to see it.
Many people have told me that they thought she should be grateful for such a loving and, I think, accurate account of her career and her music, but she's someone who's very into control, and she didn't have any control over this, and so she's upset.
I'll go on record saying I haven't finished the book yet, but I think you've done a great job.
Thank you very much.
And you know me, if I didn't think you did a good job, I'd say, Stephen.
I wouldn't be here.
Well, no, you'd be here, and I'd say, this is great, but no, you've done a good job so far from what I can read.
Thanks, mate.
And, we're going to send one of these books out to Buzzy Linhart. I'm going to ask you to autograph it for him.
Buzzy Linhart is a great singer-songwriter, guitarist, and I believe he was a good friend of Jimi Hendrix's also.
He was, and he's expecting our phone call at any time we want to talk to him. And his next release is the first record ever made at Electric Lady Studio.
Wow.
It's called Music, and it was the band was called Music, and it should have been called Buzzy Linhart. So now it's going to be called Electric Lady Dream, Buzzy Linhart's Music.
That's cool.
And but they were, working out the bugs in the studio. So before Collie worked there,
that's right. Her first album was one of the first records produced there. Not in the first five, but pretty close. And she talks about how she would go to these parties, when they would open, when they had an official opening for the thing, and about what a great host Jimi Hendrix was, who owned the studio, and because he kept taking his friends into the bathroom personally. And she thought that he was a really good host at this party because of this. And later she said, I was so naive, I didn't know anything about drugs.
Well, Jimmy did Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys. He worked with a lot of different groups. It would have been, he played on Stephen Still's second album.
He worked with the Last Poets.
Love them from Performance, the Mick Jagger movie. Night descends as the sun's light ends. He
made a great recording with them. It's very hard to find now, actually, but it's the Poets chanting about Miss Dupree or something like that, and for 6 or 7 minutes he just riffs over it, or I should say like this, because he was a left-handed guitar player.
You can't really tell it's him on the Jane Mansfield record.
I didn't know that's new information.
Oh well, he worked with that guy, the Curtis Knight, right, the manager there, Ed Chalpin. And Ed Chalpin had this recording studio, and he managed Jane Mansfield. So there's a 45 with, you can get the CD now all over eBay. It's Jane Mansfield and Jimi Hendrix. One song, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to the book, but you know who Jane Mansfield's daughter is.
Very famous. Yeah, on the what's her name? Haggerty.
Mariska Haggerty.
She's so beautiful, but then again, so was Jane.
Jane would be very proud.
I would think so.
Very proud.
She's very beautiful.
How long did it take you to write More Room in a Broken Heart?
I started the book in early 2009, and it came out in January of 2012, so 9, 10, 11. It took 3 years to research and write, even though and mostly because I didn't think it would take that long, because I have to say that the reason I did this book is because one of my best friends is Carly Simon's brother, Peter Simon, who's a
great guy,
a photographer. Great guy, great photographer. And so I met Carly when she was about 19 because I went to college with her brother. And over the years I've sort of worked with her on various projects, and I I interviewed her for, the Behind the Music thing on VH1, and
Nice.
wrote about her for Rolling Stone. And then a few years ago, she asked me to write the CD booklet for her greatest hits album. So I was pretty familiar with her stuff.
The one where she reworked everything?
She reworked. These were the first time that a lot of her single mixes came out on CDs. They were selling these to soccer moms who weren't playing the records because they didn't have turntables anymore. So this was a package called Carly Simon Reflections that had her greatest hits all packaged together on a single CD for the first time, so that her fans could play them in their SUVs or their MPVs or on the way to the soccer game. And so, and I wrote this thing, these liner notes, and they mostly were a meditation on kind of how crazy that she is. And no one will admit any quicker than Carly that she has issues about various things. But she liked that. She thought it was very honest, and we talked about doing a book together, but it never really panned out because I really wanted to do one kind of book, and she wanted to do more of a kind of a touchy-feely book about her lyrics and diary jottings and lots of photographs and pressed flowers and stuff like that, and I couldn't get into it. And the other thing was I'd done all these books about bands, Joe. I've done about 15 or 16, and Led Zeppelin and The Doors and Fleetwood Mac and Guns N' Roses and on and on and on. Stones.
Forgot to bring my Fleetwood Mac book that you wrote.
And I
got
was getting tired of writing books about bands. I thought it was like, don't bore us, get to the chorus. And I realized that I looked in the bookstore near where I live in Braintree, Massachusetts, and all the customers in the place were women. And I thought to myself, I think I should try to write a book and try to sell them to women. And so I don't want to write about bands anymore, but I think there's a couple of really heroic women out there who've never been written about before, and Carly's one of them, and I'm thinking about doing one about Stevie Nicks now, who's someone there are no books about it, and who also has an incredible story, and
Sure.
Who I know a little bit through because I did a book with Mick Fleetwood. So that's kind of how this book, More Room in a Broken Heart, came into being.
That is fascinating. Now, I'm going to go back a little. Peter Simon I knew from WCAS Radio. Remember Wickus?
Yeah, it was the Cambridge AM station.
Which is now...
On Green Street or Franklin Street, I forget which.
Which is now WJIB, which is over... Bob Bidner bought it, and he made it Memories.
No, WJIB used to be the easy listening station in Boston a long time ago. So that's still on the air as a radio station?
It went off the air, but Bob Bidner bought CAS,
Oh.
which became WG. It became like a gospel station, GPL or something gospel, right?
I see.
And then they were selling time and they couldn't survive, and Bob Bidner bought them, and he bought JTO in Maine. So he lives in Maine now, but he does JTO and JIB. He bought the JIB call letters and put them on the old Wickus. And he moved it, it's right near Fresh Pond Circle.
I see.
Right near the Don Law Company where they used to be.
I see.
And I was a DJ, I was the program director of AM 1670, Alston Brighton Free Radio. So Bob used to let us rebroadcast on Saturday night, so I used to go on JIB. So I felt good because I knew Peter Simon from back then and Amy Wachtel.
He had a reggae show. And Amy too, I think, right? They were playing reggae music, right?
Amy's on my Facebook.
In the early days of reggae. And
they were the pioneers.
And occasionally,
in
Peter would
Boston.
Peter lived on Martha's Vineyard, and I was living in Cambridge, and occasionally he would call me up and say, I can't make it up. Would you come and do my show? And so I would come and make because I don't know anything about the radio, but I would come and the engineer would, spin the platters and hit the buttons, and I would, because I knew a lot about reggae in those days. I was,
Wow.
I was, as I say, I think I told you I wrote 3 books about Jamaican music. So
That was my question. Did Peter work with you on the reggae book?
yeah, we did one called Reggae Bloodlines that came out in 1977, and then another one called Reggae International. And
Did
then
he co-author with you?
Yeah, usually
wow.
these are Stephen Davis, Peter Simon books. But then I did a book with Bob Marley. Then he died, and I finished it by myself. But I used some of Peter's pictures. But in this book, there's about 50 unpublished photos of Carly Simon by her brother. It's one of the best photo sections that I've ever put together. I'm very
Peter Simon's a great
Yeah,
photographer.
I'm very proud of the photos in this book. I spent a lot of money on them, and he really soaked me, I have to say. But it's really worth it because there are all these great intimate photos of her, like naked. Not really.
No, but what you've done for the world is, we've all heard about Carly Simon and her father, and there's Richard Simon, a photo of him, and that must be from the Simon archives, right?
Yep, Peter had that, yep.
Did Peter take that, or?
No, it's from the Simon & Schuster archives. He was the founder of the publisher Simon & Schuster in the late 1920s, and before Carly was born, her father was a very interesting guy, actually, Joe. He invented all the kind of things you'd think about modern publishing, publicity, advertising. He invented little golden books. He was in on that. He was the first, one of the first people to do pocket books. Remember the little kangaroo there was a little kangaroo with a tiny little kangaroo coming out of the pouch? That was pocket books. So he invented all of these things.
I remember the golden books. I have some.
Little golden books. I got all mine, at least my Howdy Doody ones. But I got
fascinating stuff.
I've got Pokey Little Puppy too, by the way. But anyway, he invented all this stuff, but he died very young, and at the age of about 60 in 1960. And this was one of the early traumas that Carly experienced, and there's quite a bit about it in the book. The other thing that most people don't know about her is this great singer and songwriter who's a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, along with George Gershwin, who was her very good, close to her parents before she was born. But Carly couldn't even speak until she was 6 years old. She had a terrible stammer. She had a stutter. She wasn't allowed to answer the phone. She couldn't say, pass the pepper at meal times, and there was all these, her mother was actually quite brilliant in getting her to get over this. But even today I noticed, I saw Carly last summer and she got upset about something or other, not me, and she started to stammer. So today, at her, whatever her advanced age is, no one really knows, she will still stammer when she's upset. So she overcame this and became this great singer and was able to present herself in a professional fashion, but she had a lot of stuff to overcome, and a lot of that's in this book, a lot of her trials and tribulations.
Now, she had financial problems with all her millions. I would think that the book is perfect timing to actually help her, to keep her name in the public eye.
Well, I would have hoped so, but again, she feels that my book is too revealing, that I knew too much and I let too much out, when in fact, I kept an awful lot back.
I thought...
You know the stories.
I wanted to know more,
yeah.
And I'm like, Stephen's being nice.
You just mentioned someone, for instance, that you knew had been involved with Carly at a certain point in her career, and I didn't know that. And there's probably a lot of that out there. So I tried to write up only about the relationships that made a difference to her music.
Would you mind if we called one of her friends?
Sure, call them up.
And let's see, you might have to talk a little louder because I usually put the phone over there. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's see if I can.
Well, you can just, because I don't really know Buzzy, but you do that. Ask him about Jimi Hendrix. I'd love to hear what he had to say.
Let's see if I can pull this off. Get him nice and loud. We're going to talk to Buzzy Linhart if he picks up the phone.
Hello, Wincam.
Ah, he knows who it is. Buzzy, say hello to Stephen Davis.
Hi, Stephen Davis. Let me turn Barney Frank off.
What about Barney Frank?
He's watching him on MSNBC or something.
Oh, good old Barney.
Have a reggae record.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, fellas.
Hi, Buzzy. So Buzzy, what was Jimi Hendrix really like? Because I remember someone told me, we have a couple mutual friends from the old days in New York, and someone said that you were actually very close to Jimi Hendrix, and I don't think I've ever even talked to anyone who was close to Jimi Hendrix.
The last thing he actually said to me was, he lit a Marlboro, took a drag, blew it out, held it up and said, if I can quit these, I've beat everything. He was 8 months drug-free at the time of his death, and it's people don't really know that.
Well, I saw I saw the movie called Blue Wild Angel about the Isle of Wight performance, which was one of his last performances before he did it. It's really a knockout thing. And he actually seems very coherent and sober to me, much more so than in other films that I've seen of him. So I think I can certainly believe what you're saying.
It was his goal at one point to prove that to himself and others too, because some people in the press were rude enough to suggest that his genius was really coming from the acid, and that he would have just been another person without LSD and the drugs. And it's ridiculous, but he had been smoking and having beers since a very early age, and wanted to be able to play without those requirements or restrictions. And Dolly Dagger, his girlfriend Devin Wilson, told me that they had gone into treatment at home with doctor's help, and that Jimmy was able to clean up. She didn't have as much success, and that was her request to me, was that I pass on the word that she swears he was 8 months drug-free.
That's very inspiring to hear that. Now, Buzzy, you were one of the early singer-songwriters. In 1970, you were in the same years that
It's just because I'm so old.
Well, I'm just saying in the same year.
Yes, I got to be in that, around those people, but that I was hoping to meet Woody Guthrie or Pete Seeger, and I was in a little kind of folk rock duo when I was 16 and 17, Buzzy and Tyrone. A guy who had the guitars and could drive a car and keep the business together. And one of the things that he turned me on to was the Alan Lomax book with thousands of folk songs, and not just the folk song, but they would go through it chronologically with the very earliest versions they could. And of course, many of these songs, I guess most of them had been recorded sometimes out in the work fields in Southern America when they traveled around with a Nagra portable. Well, it wasn't actually portable, weighed a couple 100 pounds, but you didn't have to plug it in. And
they worked off the car battery, I think.
I guess so. They did a lot of times. Yes.
They did, yep. I was just telling Joe that I saw you play at the Bottom Line in 1972. Either Orleans was opening for Buzzy or Buzzy was opening for Orleans. I can't remember which way. And that you had a very beautiful girlfriend at the time.
Wow.
Who was pointed out to me as Buzzy Lionheart's girlfriend.
The only time that let's see. No, when I played the Bottom Line, we shared the bill with Long John Baldry and Kathy McDonald. Could it have been that night?
No, I was there with Orleans, so I'm pretty sure. But on the other hand,
Tom was such a sweet cat.
Yeah, great. I understand he lost his bid for re-election. He was elected to Congress.
Right.
Yes.
4 years ago to a 2-year term, but lost when Obama came in. He lost his seat in Congress it's a very, very Republican district in upstate New York, and he was like the first Democrat they'd ever elected since Thomas Jefferson was alive. So
wow.
If he hadn't been such a great guy, he never could have done it. But they have to throw everybody. If you're not helping the crowd throw everything you can underneath the bus, then you're not the kind of Republican they're encouraging.
Yep.
I read in the book that you were roommates with Jimi Hendrix.
Wow, that's one of the most famous mistakes. It's just absolutely not
I know that. Because you told me that.
Well, no,
Amazing because somebody made it up at some point or got it and didn't double check it,
And then it got into other books.
all the other books want to say the same thing.
And I interviewed the two authors that actually put that in. But Buzzy and Jimmy would jam at the Seventh Sons Loft in the Village. Seventh Sons, that
I
band.
remember the band. I saw them open I saw the Seven Sons open for the Jeff Beck Group with Grateful Dead headlining.
And the Grateful Dead
In
at the Fillmore East.
Exactly, in 1968, Seven Sons, Jeff Beck Group, and Grateful Dead, and it was the first Jeff Beck Group performance in New York, and Rod Stewart was so terrified that for the first 3 songs, he sang from behind the amps. No one could see who was singing. I was in the 7th row.
Wow.
I was with this very nice girl.
Did you recognize the bass player at that time? Because I have a friend who has photos. He actually...
The bass player of the Jeff Beck Group?
Yeah.
It was Ron Wood.
Ron Wood was playing bass, and the new lead singer was Rod Stewart.
And Mick Waller on drums. Played behind the beat. He was great.
The thing I wasn't sure of.
Yeah.
Now, were you in the Seventh Sons at that gig?
Yeah, and it was 2 nights.
2 nights, right.
Exciting thing.
What did you play in the band that night on stage?
Bill Graham heard us. A couple of our roadies were on the head of the team of people who gutted that theater and rebuilt it. The Village Theater it was.
Yeah, on 2nd Avenue.
And because of that, they got to recommend us to Graham, and he heard us play, and he said what we were doing so well that he had had the bad experience trying to manage some groups, but consider managing me, and offered again in Northern California just about 6 weeks before he passed away in that helicopter accident. He had seen me direct his kid in a production at Wavy Gravy's Camp Winter Rainbow School for theater training and training for life. It's a great place. And the Grateful Dead donated a stage and a light system, and 20th Century Fox donated, they say 30,000 costumes. You just take the kids over there and they pick out what they like, and then you write a play around it. And Bill Graham saw his child at graduating ceremonies and took me on his lap and hugged me and said whatever I wanted to do to call him, and we would do it.
So, Buzzy, after the Fillmore...
I just know him as just, that kind of a guy.
After the Fillmore
Mr.
gig...
Johnson takes me on his lap, too.
Buzzy, can you hear Stephen okay?
I missed, I heard him kind of exclaim, but no comment lately.
He's got a question.
No, I was just going to ask if you, after the Fillmore East gig, if you had anything to eat at Ratner's Dairy Restaurant next door.
Every time. Every time. Last time I ate there, Russ Kunkel, Carly's drummer at the time, and then famously James's drummer forever and ever, Leah Kunkel's husband, and Leah is Cass Elliott's sister.
That's right. Leo's now a lawyer in Western Massachusetts.
But yeah, Ratner's, thanks for the memories.
There you go.
Can I ask you, Buzzy, were you Carly Simon's boyfriend?
Yes, for a few months. I think in the end that James was who she belonged with. She really was crazy about him at the time. And as she and I became closer, she knew I'd already told her, because I knew her from years earlier, so I told her that I had been married to the wrong lady, and that we were in the middle of separating and divorcing. And everything was fine until Carly met Jeannie, and Jeannie was 4'11" and a half, and he was a button. And Carly said, "You guys, you know, we had kids, we had twins also, so it wasn't a good idea for us at that time, but it was temporarily toward a classy lady, but
Temporarily toward, I like that.
Excellent.
just between us guys in private, real sexy.
And how did, Eddie Kramer was your engineer on that music album, right?
Yes, and co-producer. So I took Carly over. Jack Holtzman had wanted to sign her for years. As a matter of fact, at one point, Holtzman and Carly, them being together as a couple, excuse me, and
Bless you.
my wife, from who I was separating from, spent a weekend together up at some great lodge and piece of land he had up somewhere around Woodstock. And apparently he proposed marriage to her biannually or something for years. First time I remember her, she and Lucy were singing Simon Sisters, and they had done a kids album, folk album, Itsy Bitsy Spider, etc., which means great, no royalties to be paid if they're public domain. So they put out an album on Columbia when Carly was about, I think they were 17 and 18. Are they about a year apart?
They're 3 years apart, and the first two records came out on Cap.
Cap, okay.
And then they did
K-A-P-P, right?
Yeah. And then later on they had that song that Lucy wrote called Winkin', Blinkin' and Nod. And they were there.
Oh, right.
And they got on.
That was an old famous poem.
Yeah, Edward
Someone's
Field,
poem.
right. And they got on Hootenanny in 1964. And Jack Holtzman saw them and then said, I'd like to sign them. And that's how
I did not
Carly
know that
Simon got
part. And
signed.
I'd seen a little hootenanny as I passed through my parents' house in Cleveland, and I knew all about it because we'll call him in private, in reference, Junkie Bob Gibson, one of the greatest entertainers of all time.
It's funny how he's forgotten, isn't it? No one remembers Bob Gibson anymore, but he was very...
But Bob Gibson, it was Gibson and Camp, and then it was two Bobs, and they did the Gator Horn album. It just prepared everything to happen, and that was the inspiration for the greatest folk rock album of all time, which was Tear Down the Walls with Fred Neil and Vince Martin doing a similar thing, and then Jesse Colin Young and their great producer Jerry Corbett, who had been a partner with Charlie Daniels through 4 or 5 albums, but they were going to die of cocaine and are we on the radio yet?
We are on the radio, and Buzzy, I got to get back to Stephen's book, but I wanted you guys to meet on the air.
All right, that's a good way to do it. It's on record now. I told what I remembered to be the truth, and it's great to meet you, and yeah.
Great to meet you too, Buzzy. You're an important artist, and I've enjoyed your music for years and hope to continue to do so.
Great. I want to say one thing quickly, if I could, guys, and that's that as close as we were, that once James and Carly met, she called me one night and she said, Buzzy, it wouldn't be fair to hang out with you now that James and I are together. He's too shy. He knows we were together, and it's embarrassing to him, but he loves your music. And Danny Cooch told me twice that James played my records 20 hours a day. And if something wasn't on the turntable playing, it was sitting there ready to play. He and I are both kind of shy, and when we meet, we're not sure what to say, but I had, for a code name for Comcast or something, cable, I had to pick, they said, who's your favorite singer? And I had to say James Taylor. And love you guys.
We'll talk to you soon, Buzz. Thank you so much.
Going the right direction.
All right, man.
Good afternoon, some good people. And
Bye.
forever.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
He's great. Seventh row you saw. The
Seven Sons
Sons.
from the seventh row, yep. With Susie Steinbach, our first date.
Really?
And then the Jeff Beck group, first time they'd ever played.
In America.
With Rod Stewart, well, actually, yeah, no, that's true. Then they came up to Boston and played the Tea Party. And on that tour, I think they actually had played the Tea Party first and then went down to New York, because most of those English bands liked to start in Boston because A, it wasn't as intimidating, and B, the audiences, there were so many students that the audiences tended to be the same age as the bands. So bands like Fleetwood Mac and Led Zeppelin and you know, Humble Pie, and they all wanted to play the Tea Party first down
Right.
on what's it called street, Berkeley Street, in an old synagogue, and they would. It was much less intimidating than playing in New York. Boston was a smaller town. The audiences were younger. It was more intimate. So we saw all these incredible bands. I mean, the Fleetwood Mac basically became the house band of the Tea Party in 1969. They were. What was the name of that roadie? You know him, who worked with Fleetwood Mac. And
Stuart, Dinky Dawson.
Dinky Dawson. Is he alive and well?
He's a dear friend. He just
Yeah,
called
good.
me because we're working on a Lou Reed book.
Oh, yeah. Give Dinky my best when you talk to
I
him.
will be talking to him the next
He had
couple of
cancer
days.
for a while. That's why I asked. He was.
Yeah.
Was-
He was in rough shape 6 months ago, and he still went out to the NARM or whatever it was, the big convention.
Uh-huh.
And we were together at with Spanky and our gang, because he's working with Spanky and our gang.
Yeah.
And we were at the Charles Rosenaith thing down in Connecticut. You were there, right, Jay? Jay LaFawn, my producer, director, was down there, and Dinky was in rough shape, and he didn't know at the time. We none of us knew, but he looked awful.
Oh.
And we got him on camera, and then he went right in the hospital. But thank God he's doing well, because I was this mad Lou Reed fan, and he was Lou Reed's sound man. And we're writing this book on the 1973 tour. Mm-hmm. You know, Dick Wagner and Steve Hunter, that whole thing. So he's got these tapes, and I've got tapes, and we've done interviews, so it's a lot of fun. Dickie's a great guy.
I understand that he invented the backline, and that it happened because, and maybe you can explain what the backline is better than I can, but it's the backline is all the wires from all the instruments feeding into a mixing board in back of the stage rather than in front of the stage. And this happened because Peter Green, he would start mixing from the front of the stage, and Peter Green would get so mad that he would, who was the guitar player, the founder of Fleetwood Mac, would get so mad that he would throw stuff at Dinky. And so Dinky decided he wanted to be behind the band mixing rather than in front of the band, and so that's how the idea of the back line came up.
He wrote a book with Carter Allen from ZLS.
I remember that,
Life
yeah.
on the Road. And he had put the soundboard in the audience.
Right.
So I guess he,
Which was the convention of the day, right? I mean, that's what you
Yeah.
did, and still do, I think. What are
I'll
we?
keep this to a very minimum.
What are we dialing up, Dinky?
Talk to him all the time.
We'll get him to tell the story.
If he's home. Life on the road, you know, he's always on the road.
Joe, how come you know everybody?
Because I know Stephen Davis, they're all impressed, so they all want to be my friend.
508-224.
Whoop, he's not home, but that was his voice, people.
That was
Dickie's a dear friend.
We almost gave out his phone number to your 9 million viewers.
And no one's got his phone number. The great Lou Reed,
Well,
Birds,
he would-
no one's got his phone number.
He would have been steamed.
Because it's under his wife's maiden name, and she works for Don Law.
Oh, okay.
So
Where do they
we-
live? I mean, South Shore, North Shore?
South Shore.
I see.
They live near you. Well, not near you, but they're maybe 20 minutes from you.
Okay.
So
Give him my best when you speak to him, please.
you should go over his house because he's got so many tapes, and he's always
Really?
at the
Yeah,
sound hole with his
yeah.
old tapes.
Oh, God.
You know, you'll spend the summer down there.
All right, well, we'll take him out to lunch sometime.
I'm going to put his number there I got Buzzy's number there for you. You can call these guys. Buzzy co-hosts the show by phone, and Dinky comes in. He hasn't been in this studio yet.
Mm-hmm.
I've been camped out here for 2 years. I love it here.
It's nice.
And I live in Medford, so
This is good.
You know, they're really helpful.
I love the clutter. I feel makes me really feel at home.
You're the clutter. I mean, it's you. It's like,
I know.
paperback version
No, I
of
mean,
Jim Morrison.
I feel like I'm at home in my office.
You know, when
Except it's Joe's studio.
I love the big print. I'm looking for page 199 because
What's that? That's Aerosmith.
the Aerosmith book, in the other book I had, page 199 is my dear, the art director for my record label, Billy Montgomery,
Now Billy Perry.
Billy Perry
Married to
is-
Joe Perry.
dear friend of yours,
The most beautiful woman in the world.
and she's got her sons coming in here, and Adrian is a friend of mine from Alyssa Perry's
His
kid.
Joe's first wife, yes.
So Adrian and his brother Tony have
A band.
a band called Tab.
The Tab Band. Tony and... Wait, what does Tab mean?
Tony,
and-
Adrian.
Tony, Adrian Band.
I
Like that.
guess.
Yeah, right.
Now, there's a third child that I've never met.
Roman.
Roman.
Roman's a sophomore at Boston University. Homeschooled, by the way. And I always gave Billy a hard time about it. And I said, why, homeschooling, why? And then when he got into Boston University, where I went to and I couldn't get into today, it's very hard to get in there. I mean, they would have laughed at me. I just said, you were right, you told me you were doing the right thing.
She
so.
homeschooled Roman?
Roman was homeschooled.
So Billy homeschooled, or she have tutors?
No, well, they had tutors come in they're on the tour bus.
Wow.
That's a mobile family. They have this unbelievable tour bus.
The
and
Perrys do or Aerosmith?
The Perrys do. Everyone has their own bus. Brad has his own bus, and
Sounds like Marty Ball and when the Jefferson Airplane reunion. Mm-hmm. Joe Buchwald, Marty's dad, put them all on the bus, and they did that 1989 tour.
I see. Well, these guys, each guy has a bus.
Why not?
Why not?
Hey. So is Walk This Way a perennial, your book?
Walk This Way is a book that I did with Aerosmith. It came out, I started working on it in around 1993. I went around the world with them twice, and we did all the interviews and stuff on the road. And it came out in 1997 and was a New York Times bestseller, and is just about to come out again
Oh,
with an updated version. And the reason is because Steven Tyler's profile is so high now because of American Idol, and also they made a new album, and they're going to go out and tour this summer as Aerosmith, and they've been working again after being idle for a while, and so
being idle?
Yeah, Idle.
They weren't Idle because they are Idle.
He was on Idle, so the band was on Idle, and to be honest with you,
Different spelling, I get it, sorry.
to be honest with you, that Stephen, I mean, I don't want to gossip too much here, but Stephen's tenure on Idle meant that Aerosmith couldn't work for a long time, and so there were some hard feelings about that, and this is reflected in this book.
But I think it's good that he did Idol for Aerosmith. I mean,
that's what he says. If you saw him on 60 Minutes last month, where he said there was a long profile of Aerosmith, and he basically said, "Look, these guys are mad at me because I'm doing this American Idol thing. But frankly, these guys are riding on my coattails." That's his word. They should be happy. And oh man, when Joe Perry heard that, he was not happy.
Steven, now you know that Mick Jagger and Keith Richards have a fight every 5 years that I don't think is really a fight. That it's PR. And Perry and Tyler certainly took from the pioneers, Mick and Keith. I don't think all these fights are real fights. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think they're real fights.
Wow.
Because the old joke is about in the academic world is, why are academic politics so vicious? And the answer is because the stakes are so low. But with rock, it works the other way. The stakes are so high that these people who have known each other since, in many cases, were 16, 17, 18 years old, they've had it. They're fed up with them. I know for a fact that Keith and Mick have a very contentious, unfriendly relationship. It's not fake. And I could even point to you. I tried to publish the issue why. I did a book on the Rolling Stones called Old Gods Almost Dead. It came out 10 years ago. And I
have that one too.
And
I forgot. You have so many books, I forget.
Yeah, there's tons of them.
Because I got Bluesheimer.
And old-timers.
And Bluesheimer.
Yeah, and so I found, went to England, I did some reporting, and I found out that there was an incident around 1981, 1982 that was so horrible that Keith decided that his friendship with Mick Jagger was over. And I started the book this way, but the lawyer wouldn't let me publish the details. And I to this day, I can't really divulge them, except to say, Joe, that the rift between those two are real. It doesn't mean they haven't worked together in 30 years, because obviously they have. But I understand that, the Stones' anniversary is like this year. What is it, 60th anniversary, right? I mean...
Yeah, and...
it's 1960, 72, 82, 92, 02. So 60 years and they're not going out on the road.
Well, you know that Jimmy Miller, I represented him for many years.
He was the greatest of the Rolling Stones producers.
And I have to get his daughter, Dina Miller, some footage. Dina Miller was on the road with Meatloaf during that tour. She's not on the album, but Bad Out of Hell, she was the singer. Mm-hmm. And I met her we've known each other for decades, but I met her out in Springfield. She was touring with Get Right Back to Where We Start, Maxine Nightingale. Mm-hmm. And Dina Miller's an awesome singer. Her father would never produce her. Mm-hmm. So I've got all these great tapes of Jimmy's. I'm thinking of getting Dina and Jimmy working together. I mean, it is this anniversary. Mm. There's lots of stuff out, and you've got a Stones book, so are they going to reissue that? It's still in print, actually. It never went out of print. I'm trying to get them to do, again, an updated version of the paperback. But I think I'm hearing that the Stones will do something next year. Play a few stadiums or something like that. They certainly don't need the money, but I would imagine that there'll be one final Stones album and one final tour, and I wouldn't be surprised if they don't start in Boston like they have for the last, 8 or 9 tours. They like playing, they like coming here, rehearsing, they check into the Four Seasons. And they take a whole floor of the Four Seasons. Charlie Watts, you can see walking his grandchildren around the Boston Common, and they love Boston. And I hope they have my dear friend and guest of this show, Mick Taylor, in the band. That's what they were talking about. That's the rumor, that they have that Mick Taylor will play on the Mick Taylor songs and Ron Wood will play on the Ron Wood and the more modern things. I heard a rumor there might be a Rolling Stones box set finally. A box set of what? Of like all the outtakes and stuff. Oh. Yeah. It's a rumor, and all of a sudden I'm at Rob Fraboni's house and he drops these 10 CDs in my lap, and I see titles I've never heard of. Yeah, Rob Fraboni is a sound engineer who was very close to Keith Richards. And he produced part of Bridges to Babylon. And Keith has Rob there for the old earthy Jimmy Miller sound. He engineered Goat's Head Soup with Jimmy Miller. He did. So that's why Jimmy brought me to a Keith Richards session, and Keith introduced me to Rob, and we've been friends ever since '88. He also worked on the band's records, and he was in Woodstock for Levon Helm's funeral last week. You were there. Rob Fraboni. You were there? It's very sad. I just heard some band on ZLX in a tremendous live version of The Wait. What an incredible group. Yeah, Levon's voice. It's like, I don't know if you saw when he died, the New York Times had a full-page obituary. It was like the president of music had died. Good. It was on the front page on a little thing, and then you went to page 9, and there's an entire page about Levon Helm, most of which was, of course, stolen or borrowed from the book that I did with him called This Wheel's on Fire. Stolen or borrowed. What amazed me was that you had to go to Easy Rider, the movie, in order to hear the band. You didn't hear them on the radio. Not much. You could hear them on the progressive rock stations like BCN, right, WBCN, and WNEW, but never on... Well, Cripple Creek was an AM hit. That's the only one. Yeah, that was the only one. Yeah. But The Wait, you'd go to Easy Rider, and there's this great song in the soundtrack. But other than that... well, it's funny that you say that, because the song does appear in the movie.
but it doesn't appear on the soundtrack because the band's manager, Albert Grossman, wouldn't let it. So there's a great Easy Rider soundtrack by, it's mostly the Byrds music and stuff like that, Ballad of Easy Rider. But there is this incredible thing in the movie where there's a sunrise. The two guys are, the two motorcycle guys and Jack Nicholson are watching the sunrise, and The Wait comes on. But when you went to buy the Easy Rider soundtrack, it wasn't on there.
I might have too much Bluesheimers. I'm going to go out on a limb. Is there a version of The Wait by the band Smith that had the hit Baby It's You?
I don't know.
And it might be on the soundtrack, so I got to go home and look at the soundtrack, because I don't know either.
You know what band, the Smiths, the English
Smith.
band?
No, the group Smith, that great chick singer, Baby It's You. She did it, the Shirelles did it, the Beatles did it, but then there was this killer version in 1968.
I'm not familiar with that at all.
Oh, you will love. I'm going to email you the link to YouTube of and you will love it.
Okay.
But I think they did The Wait as well. You know who else I think did The Wait? Because Jimmy Miller loved the band. I think Jimmy cut a rare version with Spooky Tooth. That's like a bonus track.
My favorite bit about The Wait is that it starts out, he says, when I went down to Nazareth, was feeling about half past dead. You know what that refers to, Nazareth?
No.
Nazareth, Pennsylvania is where the Martin Guitar Factory is.
Ah.
And that's what he's talking about. He went down to Nazareth, Pennsylvania to get a new guitar. But of course, people think of Jesus of Nazareth, and so the band, it has this spiritual thing to it but it's really talking about the Guitar Factory.
And the live version's very gospel, so of course you can't get away from the Jesus thing.
Exactly.
We've got 9 minutes left, and I want you to...
Well, time flies, man.
It's a fun show, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much to cover with you. Like I said, we could do an overnight 6-hour show, Stephen, and not run out of material.
I'll camp out.
That was the original focus of this show. I wanted to do an overnight 6-hour thing.
You know, it'd be like Jerry Lewis, and say, with Flash, they can send us money.
But and then what we do is we put Mick Taylor's interview on, and we go for lunch somewhere, and then we come back, Dinky Dawson interview, and anything we touch upon. Peter Kaler interview. We get hours with Peter Kaler.
Mick Taylor, by the way, is, I believe, as we speak, is at the Iridium for 6 nights in New York. He's playing with a band. Max Middleton on keyboards and stuff
I
like
love
that.
Max.
And I think this is going on now. I think he started 2 or 3 days ago, and I think he has 2 or 3 more nights.
I got to look it up and see if he comes to Boston. I should bring him to Boston. We got this beautiful theater called the Chevalier in Medford, 2,000 seats, 2,400.
It's the old movie theater, right?
No, they had, it's next, it was attached to the high school. So it's the 5th biggest concert hall in Boston proper.
I see.
Lou Rawls was there, Frank Sinatra, John F. Kennedy spoke there. So I'm going to be bringing Ian Lloyd of Stories, Gary DiCarlo of Steam, Na Na Hey Hey Kiss 'Em Goodbye, and I'm hoping Herman Hermits, Peter Noon. Many of the guests from Visual Radio, we're going to put them in the venue, so I'm talking to them maybe tomorrow about starting a concert series there, because this beautiful theater is sitting there in Medford. I got to bring Mick Taylor in. Now that you tell me he's in America, because he was in England.
Well, he lives in England, I think, but he's playing at jazz at this 6 nights at this jazz club. I think it's sold out in an hour.
Good for Mick.
I don't think you can get in. I mean, I think it's
good.
They announced this
for Mick.
a couple of months ago, and I think they're gone.
It's totally. I'm so busy with the show and other things. This stuff is going right by me, and in the old days it never would have. So thank you.
You got to read the New York media in order to stay pretty much, because that's really still where it's happening in terms of getting information. I mean,
I think I shall do that. Let me ask you this. In this day and age, and I have a lot of authors come through here, as you can imagine, you get 400 pages plus here. And I don't know if I asked you that for this book, but the Jim Morrison book, which I love, but you've got well over almost 500 pages here. The book publishers don't give out that to authors these days. Penguin Gotham let you do 400, that's amazing.
Well, I've written, I think it's 16 or 17 books, and I think 6 of them have been New York Times bestsellers. So I'm batting around 400, and which is good in that industry. So they kind of trust my instincts about pacing a story, And with with this Carly Simon book, she started out in 1962, and but her father was so famous that you really have to start the book in the 1920s, and then explain where she came from. So I try to write, I try not to be boring, but on the same time, especially on a music book, Joe, you want to get every song in there, and because we want to sell books to her fans. And sometimes if you don't put every song in there, they'll say, well, this was a great book, except there was nothing about, pick something out of your hat. But
Well, you got the Love Still Growing with Buzzy Linhart that he wrote and played on.
it's in there, right?
He played, yeah, you got it in here. And
But I didn't know that they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Now, you see, I'm preparing my paperback.
you got his private number.
I got his private number. Well, I don't think he's going to give me anything more than he gave us here, but it's.
He will.
I have a well, probably,
got
yeah.
more.
But I wonder if he has any pictures of himself with Carly. That would be something I'd be pretty interested in for the paperback. But we'll see.
Interesting.
But now, see, this is, I can say now that his story about her warning him off when she was getting together with James, saying it wouldn't be fair, because I'm really into this guy. I'd never heard that before, and it's going to go into my paperback.
And I guess Holzman wanted him to introduce her to Eddie Kramer, and there's that whole, his first album at Hendrix's place, and then that whole connection. So there's a lot of stuff with Buzzy. He has so much information, like on Hendrix, that it goes on and on and on. And we've got probably 40 hours of interview tape with Buzzy. I mean, we did a show.
Sure.
We do a show every Thursday night, so we do an hour.
Yeah.
Because he's got so many memories.
He's very
from us.
knowledgeable, yeah, it's true.
And he's such a great musician.
Yeah.
You've been around all these greats, Aerosmith, exploring Jim Morrison. I'd love to talk to you more about that, because we did an hour on that, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah, it's a good story.
It is, and
The amazing thing happened to me, one of the most amazing things in my career, if we have enough time.
4 minutes.
I wanted to find out how Jim Morrison died, and the only way I could do that was to go to Paris and try to track down. He was in Paris for 3 or 4 months before he died, but he must have had friends. So I went to Paris and I called the woman who translates my books into French, and I said, explain the situation. Jim Morrison, must have had friends. And she said, oh yeah, I can give you 2 or 3 numbers. And 2 days later, I was eating lunch with a guy who had been the boyfriend of the woman in whose apartment Jim had died. And we got to talking, and he liked me. He said, well, come home with me. And I went back to his house, and he pulls out a drawer, takes out a plastic bag, and in the plastic bag are Jim Morrison's last 3 notebook diaries, 72 photographs, his personal photo file, and a 1/4-inch tape with half an hour of music on it that he had just recorded it with street musicians in Paris before he died. I said to this guy, what is this? I mean, how come you have this? And he said, well, just before he died, Jim Morrison made this tape, and he came over to my little home studio and made a cassette. Then he ran out the door because he wanted to play the cassette for his girlfriend. And I said, Jim, what about this bag? He said, well, keep it. I'll get it next week. And he died. And then the guy's mother put the bag in a drawer. The guy wanted to do a thing, and it was forgotten about until his mother sold the house 30 years later. I said, well, why haven't you done anything with this? He said, well, in France, the Doors never played in France. Jim Morrison was unknown here. That's why he came to Paris, so he could disappear. So that's the kind of reporting I do. Sometimes every once in a while, Eureka, Jim Morrison's
Eureka.
notebooks, So it's just a question of pounding the pavement, whether it's Sunset Strip or Paris or Berkeley Street in Boston. It's just a question of going out there and listening to the music and keeping your ears open.
And a great songstress said that there are no secrets, but I don't agree with that.
We have no secrets, Joe. You and me, 0 secrets.
We know it all. We just... I'll tell you one of my funny stories. Tuesday night, I'm at the City Council in Medford. I said, Your Honor, make me the mayoral appointee to TV3 Medford. So I'm coming here to do the interview with you, and there's the mayor walking across the street near my house.
Uh-huh.
Your Honor, make me the mayoral appointee. You never know when you're going to bump into someone.
Yeah. So what's the upshot? Are you going to be the
Oh, no way.
Mr. TV?
Only if he gets so upset with them, he wants me in there, because I said on the city council, I'll clean it up in a week. It's a big, big story. With our 90 seconds left, the Medford's in the front page of the Globe, like 7 out of the past 14
Mayor
days.
Bloomberg in New York is from Medford.
Right.
What's the proper pronunciation of Medford?
Medford. The
Yeah, but
Ford
what's
by the
the
meadow.
proper-
It's the Ford by the meadow.
All right, but that's not what people call it. They don't call it Medford. They call it Medfa or something like that, right?
Yeah, Meffa. Meffa is the
That's
slang.
it. That's right.
But, so here we are in Winchester doing our research. Stephen,
Beautiful
you've got
town. Never been here before.
It's gorgeous.
I'm moving here.
Oh, there's so much to see. We got
Get
1
me in.
minute left. You're invited back.
I want a house here in Winchester.
What if I got Isaacs and Bieber and you, and we had a panel?
Hilarious, but Jimmy Isaacs doesn't go out of the house.
We'll get
He's like retarded.
I know. We'll get a 2-hour special. We'll
David Bieber is also kind of reclusive too.
yeah, but he's promised to be on the show.
All right.
So that would be an awesome 2 hours. wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I could make Jimmy do it. I could blackmail him. I've got stuff on him.
All right, good,
Yeah.
good.
But it's very hard to get out of the house.
They're dear friends, and they're friends we have in common. And Stephen Davis has a new book. If you have a website, do you want to give it out?
It's called rockonstephendavis.com. And it has a little pathetic blog and some Carly Simon stuff, some Aerosmith stuff, some...
rockonstephendavis.com here at WinCam, May 10th, 2012. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks, bro.
It was an awesome show. Thank you, WinCam. Thank you, Jay LaFond. He was going to direct,
Thank
but
you, Jay.
they took all our cameras for town councils. See these town councils, city councils?
This is some kind of emergency meeting?
Yeah.
Is that what they're doing?
So now our cameras are gone, so we have a better camera, but that's it,
camera.
folks.